This story is based on a real incident. In this story, 3 men managed to escape from a prison from which no one had ever come out alive. The security of this prison was so strict that even a needle could not be taken out without the guard's permission. Yet these 3 men entered the most dangerous prison in Pretoria, South Africa, and the South African police could do nothing but watch. The story begins in 1973. At that time, half of South Africa was burning because of racial discrimination, and the white police treated black people with extreme brutality. The scene then shifts to Tim and his friend Steven. They had just graduated that year and had begun protesting against this discrimination. One day, in a crowded area, the 2 men used a small explosive device to spread leaflets into the air. These were not real bombs, but simply devices designed to scatter the leaflets. People stopped, picked up the leaflets, and began reading the message. As soon as the leaflets were released, Tim immediately started running. However, Steven stopped because he wanted to see how people would react, and that decision became his biggest mistake. Just then, the police arrived, and both of them were arrested. Later, Tim's girlfriend came to visit him in jail. When she met him, Tim clearly stated that he would not deny what he had done. He said he was proud of his actions. The girl gave him some money and then kissed him goodbye. In court, Tim and Steven were accused of endangering people's lives with bombs, even though the devices were not real bombs. However, the judge, a strict white man, angrily declared that he hated those who believed all humans were equal. Tim, who was already known as a protester, was sentenced to 12 years in prison. Stephen Lee received a sentence of 8 years. Their parents cried in the courtroom as the judge continued to scold them before finally ending the case. Later, a police officer placed the handcuffed Stephen on a chair and suddenly walked away. At that moment, Stephen noticed an open window nearby. He looked around carefully. No one seemed to be watching him. In the next moment, he jumped out of the window. As he landed, he injured his leg badly. Just then, a panicked policeman fired a shot at him. Another policeman standing below caught him and began beating him mercilessly. Stephen was now severely injured. After that, the 2 prisoners were placed inside a police van and taken to the dreaded Pretoria prison. When they arrived, the prison warden, Captain Snaphill, came to meet them. He already knew everything about them, but instead of welcoming them, he began insulting them. He told them that they had betrayed their own people, and this is where their real prison life begins. It is a story where hope still manages to survive. The guards read out the prison rules and searched them thoroughly to make sure they were not carrying any weapons. After the search, they were escorted inside the prison. As Tim entered the prison, the first thing that caught his attention was the door locking system. He carefully observed it and tried to understand how it worked. Meanwhile, the guards standing in the watchtowers above displayed their automatic weapons to intimidate the new prisoners, as if they were simply waiting for an excuse to open fire. The guards then take Tim and Steven to separate cells located next to each other. There is no one else inside their cells. Tim sits quietly, thinking about everything that has recently happened. Early the next morning, a loud bell rings. Tim wakes up as all the prisoners come out of their cells and walk together toward the dining area. Tim feels a little shy and is hesitant to sit at any of the tables. Just then, a prisoner approaches him and invites him to sit with him. The prisoner's name is Dennis Goldberg. He is a well-known political prisoner who was captured many years ago while trying to oppose the apartheid government and is now serving a life sentence in this prison. Shortly after, Steven also joins them. Both of them show great respect to Dennis because he is a legendary figure to them. During the conversation, they tell him that they want to escape from the prison. At this point, an important fact becomes clear. This story is based on real events. Tim Jenkins, Stephen Lee, and Dennis Goldberg were real South African political activists who were imprisoned during the 1970s. Meanwhile, the 3 of them witness a disturbing scene. A black kitchen worker accidentally spills some soup on the floor. A guard immediately begins beating him brutally with a stick. Several white prisoners standing nearby start laughing loudly at his suffering, making the atmosphere even more disturbing. Seeing this, Dennis begins discussing the escape idea with Tim and Steven in more detail. He explains that escaping from this prison will not be easy. The prison walls are extremely high and covered with barbed wire. Guards stand in watchtowers with powerful searchlights and machine guns. Anyone attempting to escape would be shot immediately. Even digging a tunnel is nearly impossible. After explaining all this, Dennis tries to convince them to abandon this dangerous and unrealistic idea. However, another prisoner standing nearby has been secretly listening to their conversation. His name is Leonard Fontaine. He walks toward them and says that if they are planning to escape, he wants to join them. Night falls. Tim takes out a matchbox that he had secretly hidden inside his cell. He lights a match and carefully looks into the lock, trying to understand how it works. Suddenly, he hears the footsteps of a guard approaching. He quickly blows out the match and breaks the matchstick to hide the evidence. Even after that, he does not give up. For several nights, he continues studying the lock and trying to understand its mechanism. One night, he places a piece of paper over the keyhole. Using a pencil, he carefully traces the exact shape of the keyhole onto the paper. Then he inserts another thin piece of paper into the lock and slowly tries to understand the internal structure using the pencil. Now, Tim is not just thinking about escape. He is slowly beginning to plan it. Later in the dining hall, Leonard deliberately creates a disturbance. He makes noise and distracts the guard so that Tim can try to steal the keys. However, Tim fails and the chance is lost. Now they must find another way. During an exercise session in the prison yard, Tim quietly moves closer to the guard. He carefully observes the patterns and shapes of the keys hanging from the guard's belt and tries to memorize them. Later, he sketches those patterns onto a piece of paper. For the next several days, Tim takes every possible opportunity to closely observe the keys and carefully draw the shape of each one. Then Tim takes advantage of his job in the wood workshop and secretly takes small pieces of wood that he needs. Just then, a guard suddenly walks in. At that moment, Stephen drops a bowl full of nails onto the floor. The loud noise creates a distraction and draws the guard's attention. Meanwhile, Tim quickly hides the wooden pieces inside a thermos and prepares to leave. However, the guard becomes suspicious. He calls both of them over and orders them to stop. The guard decides to check the thermos. He opens it, pours out the coffee, and looks inside. To his surprise, the thermos appears completely empty, but in reality, it is not. Tim has already managed to secure the materials he needs to make the keys. Later, Tim takes out a small knife and begins cutting the wooden pieces carefully. He then joins the pieces together using glue. Night after night, Tim works tirelessly to create wooden keys. One night, he finally decides to test one of the keys on the lock of his cell door. Suddenly, a small clicking sound is heard. The door unlocks. Tim quietly opens the door and feels a surge of confidence. One morning, while some prisoners keep watch, Tim attempts to unlock the outer door of the building. At first, the key refuses to go inside the lock. After making a small adjustment, the key finally slides in. The door opens successfully, but a new problem appears. The key refuses to come out of the lock. In panic, Tim accidentally breaks the wooden key inside the lock. He immediately begins trying to remove the broken piece of wood stuck inside so he will not get caught. Just then, a guard walks past the area. Tim freezes and holds his breath. After a few tense moments, the guard continues walking and disappears from sight. Despite trying repeatedly, Tim is unable to remove the broken piece of wood. Finally, he gives up. He lies down on his bed and thinks that whatever happens next will simply have to happen. After a while, he notices something strange about the door. The latch is still open. Tim assumes that the guard probably did not notice anything unusual. He carefully inserts another key into the lock. He unlocks it again and gently closes the door. As soon as the metal lock moves, the broken wooden piece automatically falls out of the mechanism. Tim is amazed by his unbelievable luck. Meanwhile, Leonard receives a visitor. His young son has come to see him. The child comforts his father and tells him that he loves him very much and will see him again soon. Leonard stands quietly by the window, thinking deeply. Suddenly, a guard begins shouting at him harshly because he had stepped too close to the window. The shouting frightens his son. Just then, the boy's mother enters and quickly takes the child away. Leonard angrily shouts at the guards for ending his time with his son. Later, he tells Tim and Stephen that he wants to escape from this place as soon as possible. However, a new problem appears. The outer door can only be unlocked from the outside. The three men begin thinking of a unique solution. They plan to use a wire through the small barred window so they can insert the key into the lock from outside. However, this method only allows the key to enter the lock. It does not allow them to turn it. To solve the problem, the three men go to an empty cell and begin discussing possible solutions. Just then, a guard quietly approaches and begins listening to their conversation. Leonard notices him immediately. He quickly signals Tim and Stephen, and the three of them instantly stop talking. The guard asks them what they were discussing. They pretend that nothing important was happening and begin cleaning the cell. At that moment, Stephen suddenly gets an idea. Stephen suggests using a broom since it is long enough to reach the window lock. However, the problem remains. How will the key actually turn inside the lock? Tim later finds the answer while working in the wood workshop. He watches another prisoner operating a mechanical wooden machine, and an idea suddenly comes to his mind. Tim begins building a rotating wooden key holder that can turn just like a real key. He attaches the device to the end of a broom and prepares to test it. To guide the movement, he uses a small mirror attached to a toothbrush so he can see the lock clearly. On the first attempt, the key fails to enter the lock. Tim adjusts the angle slightly and tries again. Unfortunately, it still does not work. Even worse, the wooden key slips and falls onto the floor. Thinking quickly, Tim takes a piece of chewing gum. He sticks it to the end of the broomstick and uses it to pick up the fallen wooden key. By morning, Tim is completely exhausted after working all night. He tells the other two that it took the entire night, but the door finally opened. After that, the three of them place the keys inside a jar and bury it in the garden. They then quietly walk away. At that moment, a guard is watching them from a tower. He's already suspicious because he previously overheard part of their conversation. The guard walks toward Stephen and asks to inspect his bag. After checking it carefully, he finds nothing. Then he moves toward Tim. Tim quickly rushes to bury the jar in the ground. The guard approaches and asks them what they were talking about. Tim calmly replies that they were simply discussing gardening. The guard accepts the explanation and walks away. However, Dennis Goldberg has been listening to their conversation. He once again advises Tim to reconsider the escape plan. Dennis believes the plan will fail. If the attempt goes wrong, the guards will shoot them without hesitation, since they are always ready to fire at prisoners. Now the group realizes realizes that if they truly want to escape, they will need more people to help them. They need individuals who can handle different responsibilities. Gradually, the three men begin recruiting more prisoners, mostly political prisoners. These new members begin helping the group. Some bring clothes, others provide tools, and a few gather other essential items. Slowly, the escape plan becomes larger and more organized. Meanwhile, the suspicious guard continues keeping a close watch on Tim. He is convinced that Tim and his companions are planning something important. However, since he has no real evidence, he cannot take any action against them. At one point, a black prisoner quietly approaches Tim and secretly hands him a small bar of soap. Seeing an opportunity, Tim carefully presses the keys into the soap to create their exact shapes. He then hides the soap impressions under a trash container so no one becomes suspicious. A short time later, the guard comes to Tim's cell. He hands Tim a new pair of glasses. While laughing, the guard says that the black prisoner who helped them tried to escape, so they shot him. Hearing this, Tim feels intense anger inside him. However, he controls himself, knowing that even a small mistake could cost him his life. After this incident, Tim and Leonard decide to practice their escape plan. Late at night, they slowly unlock their cells. Then they quietly open the door to the entire block and begin moving down the stairs in silence. At the bottom, they notice a heavy guard sitting in a small booth. He is listening to loud classical music. Carefully, they attempt to unlock the next door without making any noise. But just as the key is about to turn, the music suddenly stops. The guard slowly begins moving toward the door. Tim and Leonard immediately close the door and start looking for a place to hide. There is no time to go back upstairs, so they quickly slip into a small closet near the staircase. They are terrified because the closet door does not close properly from their side. Moments later, the guard walks toward the stairs, mutters something to himself, and then goes upstairs. As soon as he leaves, Tim and Leonard continue practicing their escape plan. They carefully pass by the guard's booth and notice that the record player has stopped moving. They quietly unlock another door and move forward. At the same time, the guard upstairs decides to check their cells. He looks inside and sees what appears to be a man lying under a blanket. However, it is only a pile of pillows arranged to look like a sleeping person. Just then, one of the prisoners upstairs begins coughing loudly. Hearing the sound, Tim and Leonard realize that it is too dangerous to continue. They slowly close all the doors they had opened and rush back to hide in the closet again. Soon, the guard comes downstairs and notices something unusual on the floor. It is small drops of sweat that had fallen while Tim and Leonard were running. However, the guard does not pay much attention to it. He simply wipes it away with his shoe and walks off. Feeling relieved, Tim and Leonard quietly return to their cells. The next morning, Captain Snapple arrives at Tim's cell along with another guard. Tim is fast asleep because he was exhausted after the previous night. Even the loud morning bell failed to wake him. The guards forcefully wake him up and begin questioning him. Since Tim is not sick, Captain Snapple realizes that he must have stayed awake all night. Tim does not reveal anything and repeatedly says, "I'm sorry, Captain." Hearing this, Snapple becomes irritated. He angrily warns Tim that if he is found sleeping late again, he will face serious consequences. The guards then pull Tim out of the cell and begin searching it. Meanwhile, Tim and Steven notice that the guards are also searching Leonard's cell. They throw around all his belongings and even tear up the letters his son had sent him. Seeing this, Leonard becomes furious and tries to stop them, but the guards grab him and drag him away. Later, Leonard is thrown into solitary confinement. There, he angrily curses the cruelty of the guards. Afterward, Captain Snapple calls Tim over and starts scolding him for keeping banned books and papers. In anger, he throws all of Tim's belongings onto the floor. While doing so, he notices something unusual. It is a small piece of a wooden key that Tim had forgotten to discard. Seeing this fills Tim with fear. Snapple examines the object carefully and asks Tim what it is. Tim cautiously replies that it is simply a photo stand. Snapple still looks suspicious, but the explanation sounds somewhat reasonable. Finally, he leaves after warning Tim that if he is secretly planning anything, he will regret it. As soon as the guard leaves, Tim becomes extremely nervous. The pressure of carrying out such a dangerous plan under constant surveillance begins to weigh heavily on him. He starts experiencing repeated panic attacks. However, he forces himself to stay calm and continue moving forward. Learning from his earlier mistakes, Tim begins hiding the wooden keys in different places. The group continues practicing their escape again and again. Each time, they learn something new and improve their plan. One night, Tim goes to the prison dentist. After finishing his appointment, he walks back toward his cell. While returning, he notices something unusual. One of the electric doors in the prison corridor is malfunctioning. He calls a nearby guard to open it and immediately realizes that escaping will require finding a way to unlock that door as well. The next day, he is escorted quickly through the courtyard while he notices the construction of a new guard tower outside the prison. Later, Tim tells the other political prisoners that they now have 39 keys capable of opening 15 different doors inside the prison. However, many of them are still hesitant about escaping. They believe that opening doors inside the prison and actually getting out are two very different challenges. Dennis refuses the plan completely, saying that the attempt is far too dangerous. Tim tries to convince him by saying that staying inside this prison means accepting the control of the regime, but most of the other prisoners support Dennis's opinion. This disagreement leads to an argument between Leonard and Dennis because Leonard no longer wants to wait. Eventually, Tim, Stephen, and Leonard decide to release the other prisoners from the plan and continue on their own. One night, just before bedtime, Captain Snapple again enters Tim's cell and begins searching through his belongings. After the captain leaves, Tim secretly passes Stephen a piece of newspaper using a small wooden tool. Inside the newspaper is a hidden map of the prison that had been secretly printed by an anti-apartheid organization. Now everything is ready. The three men finalize their escape plan. Tim slowly unlocks his cell door. Then he quietly opens Stephen's and Leonard's doors as well. Before leaving, he asks Dennis one last time if he wants to come with them, but Dennis refuses again and simply wishes them good luck. Once outside their cells, the three men take out their hidden bags. Inside the bags are the clothes and supplies they will need after escaping. Now the most dangerous step of their lives is about to begin. They slowly begin changing into their clothes. Meanwhile, downstairs, a heavy guard rushes toward the restroom. He soon realizes that the toilet is clogged, so he walks to the closet near the staircase to find a plunger. He begins removing the boxes and crates stored inside the closet one by one. Finally, he finds the plunger. As he's about to leave, his eyes fall on the door. He notices something unusual. A paperclip is stuck there. It is the same paperclip that Leonard and Tim had used earlier while practicing in that same closet. Meanwhile, the three prisoners upstairs are fully dressed and ready to open the blocked door. Suddenly, they hear the heavy guard breathing loudly and groaning downstairs. The atmosphere instantly becomes tense. Despite the fear, Leonard gathers the courage and slowly opens the door. The three men quietly walk downstairs and hide inside the same closet. But a serious problem appears. The guard has already taken their paperclip. Tim quickly presses his finger against the door to hold it closed somehow. A few moments later, the guard returns to place the plunger back inside the closet. At that exact moment, Dennis creates a distraction to help them. He shocks himself with electricity and begins screaming loudly. Hearing the noise, the guard is forced to rush upstairs to see what has happened. Seeing their chance, Tim, Stephen, and Leonard quickly step out of the closet and run toward the next door. They begin unlocking several doors one after another. However, suddenly, they reach a door that will not open. They realize that Leonard must go back and press a buzzer that controls the electric door. Leonard quickly runs back, presses the buzzer, and the electric door opens. The three men rush through it immediately. Now they have reached the final door before the courtyard. They carefully look through the keyhole. To their surprise, they see that the large prison gates outside are wide open. But a new problem appears. None of their keys can open the white door that leads to the courtyard. This frustrates them greatly. They now have very little time left, and turning back is no longer an option, so they quickly decide to break the lock. Leonard takes out a crowbar and begins striking the door. Meanwhile, Tim stands nearby, keeping watch because he fears they might be caught at any moment. Suddenly, he hears heavy footsteps. The large guard is slowly walking toward their direction. Frightened, Tim urgently tells Leonard to hurry. Leonard works faster and faster until the latch of the lock finally becomes visible. At last, they finish preparing themselves and open the door. As they step forward, Tim suddenly notices a guard with a gun walking near the wall. He immediately pushes Leonard against the wall so they can remain hidden and wait for the right moment. Using a small mirror, they carefully keep an eye on the guard's movements. As soon as the guard walks away, Tim slowly moves toward the gate. Just outside the gate lies a busy city street where normal life continues as usual. Stephen and Leonard quietly follow him. They are surprised that such a large gate is guarded by only one guard, and even he rarely looks toward it. They take out their map, check the direction, and begin walking calmly as if they are ordinary people. No one pays any attention to them. Step by step, they move farther away from the prison. A little later, they reach a taxi driven by a black driver. They ask him to take them with him. The driver is slightly surprised. At that time in South Africa, white people usually did not ride in taxis driven by black drivers. Still, after thinking for a moment, he agrees and allows them to get inside. Morning arrives. As usual, a guard walks down the corridor and begins opening the cells. Dennis greets him and everything seems normal at first, but the guard suddenly becomes confused. Tim and Stephen have not come out of their cells, even though they should have by now. He begins to feel that something is wrong. He quickly rushes inside and is shocked to discover that their beds are empty. The cells are completely vacant. The other prisoners begin laughing loudly. Meanwhile, the terrified guard starts running around in panic and rushes to raise the alarm. Soon, chaos spreads throughout the entire prison. At the same time, the three men celebrate their incredible escape. They laugh loudly, shout with excitement, and react with overwhelming joy. The taxi driver watches them with confusion, wondering why they are so happy. Then Tim looks at the wooden key in his hand. Tears begin to fill his eyes. He cannot believe that something so impossible has actually succeeded. Soon, one of the largest manhunts begins across South Africa to capture them. Search operations are carried out everywhere. Despite all the efforts, the three men managed to cross the border successfully. Eventually, they reach London safely. There, Tim joins the African National Congress and continues his fight against apartheid. After spending 22 years in prison, Dennis Goldberg is finally released in 1985, and that is where this remarkable story comes to an end. Thanks for watching.